Hey everybody, I'm Sean Robinson,
I'm Brandon Graham.
and welcome to Living the Line. And today we're doing another duo version of Formalism Friday. Brandon, you got something good for me today?
Yeah, something I saw Paul Pope do a put out something on social media recently where he talked about the goal is to push the medium, and he mentioned like techniques that we all think of as part of the comic book language now, like when Katsuro Otomo did the way he drew kind of the lengthening of tail lights behind a motorcycle to show
Hmm.
movement. And so I have an example today of kind of an unsung technique that I think is a really powerful tool that I don't see used a lot in comics that I think people can benefit from.
Okay.
So I will share my screen here and and show you what I think what I generally think of as the manga zoom.
The manga zoom. Okay.
So this is an example of Masamune Shiro's Orion. So basically, the technique is you cut the panel between a zoom, and so it's you have a character here that you see in the distance with his sword, and then he shows the same character right in the foreground, and I think it does the effect of a camera zoom essentially.
Interesting.
And I have another
Right.
example here of this is a Matt Howarth doing the same thing.
Wait, I can't quite see the top there, so I can't see the.
Oh yeah, so it's them. They're holding a talking fish on this snowy hillside here.
Okay.
Um, and and then one of the Post brothers
Wow.
is pushed down the hill, and this one he actually uses the mountain as kind of a panel border,
Right.
which I think is fascinating.
Interesting. Yeah. So in film terms, this would be called a push in.
Yeah, yeah,
I think it's more obvious that that's what's happening in the Shiro one because he's kind of facilitating the push in with the speed lines behind it. Uh, like
certainly.
obviously I can still read this just fine, and I get what it is. But like if you look at the Shiro one, um, look at the speed lines that are converging on the back one. It's almost like that's part of the push in. Like those are guiding us to the foreground figure, which is the later time
Certainly,
piece.
and he also breaks it up a little bit by drawing the character outside of the panel border there. So it's almost like he's bleeding into the above panel, even though they're both in the same panel.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. So this is I'm trying to think of the associations I have with this particular one. I think sports manga might be the place I would have seen something like this the most. I'm thinking like Mitsuru Adachi Touch, and then Cross Game, which actually came out in English. Both of those have examples of that where you can actually sort of see the it's in your backpack. Both of those have examples of that where you can actually like similar kind of thing where they have some sort of motion or openness between the two images that help you communicate the movement.
Certainly,
What
yeah.
do you
And he's
think?
doing kind of in allusion to baseball comics. He's also doing the thing where his sword here is almost like a bat. And something that really stood out to me about baseball manga is you have the ball bends to no longer being a ball shape. And in this, his sword is moving so fast that it's kind of not quite the stick. It's like, it's got shaky lines because you're barely seeing it. And I think something really fascinating about comics is how the different ways the artists show movement with in a static image.
Yeah, and we've talked about Shiro is particularly good at that with vehicles and other things that you would think of as being stationary, that physically not squash and stretch. This is an animation technique. In animation, this is called referred to as squash and stretch.
Right. So
But you don't typically think about something like a car having those same kinds of properties as a ball. But Shiro will draw very subtle amounts of squash and stretch on a car that it looks like it has bounce as it's turning a corner. He's like applying physics just in very minute kinds of ways. But yeah, you're right. The saber here looks very much like a bat and has got is wider, not just at the top, not just for perspective reasons, but presumably optically, it's like at the edge of our visual field in a
Yeah,
way.
and he's still giving you moments of like the face and the hand of the main character here are kind of unmoved. So you have these places to almost rest the eye while everything else is moving. And I wonder what this picture would feel like if you'd done that same technique to the entire body where he's just in a blur moving.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you can kind of choose which of the, in a certain way, this is like a focusing technique, right? Because you have certain areas where the we retain higher levels of detail because those things aren't being blurred by the motion.
Yeah, it also gives the feeling, and be interested if you're getting this too. It gives the feeling like he's stopped at that point, and you're kind of just
Yeah,
you're catching up with him stopping almost.
right.
Like his
Yeah,
arm is
totally.
still in motion, but his body is no longer moving.
Yeah. So if you would break the share here, uh, so I got a question for you. This is Rowan, by the way. Uh,
Hey,
jo
Rowan.
joined us at the end here. Do you know of a camera technique where they do a push in, but they're also changing the depth of field at the same time, and so you have like it's not used terribly often, but it kind of gives this like you can see the background like deform. Uh,
Yeah, it's often used if I'm remembering the right technique, or to basically show when somebody learns a really dramatic piece of
right.
information and they're like taken aback, and their
Yeah.
world is changing, and suddenly the background kind of zooms in and they zoom in slower than the background essentially.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I was just curious if you have ever seen an example of that in a comic, because I can only think of one off the top of my head.
I think, well, my example, which is maybe not quite that technique, but it does it in an interesting way, is Paul Pope's Heavy Liquid when it shows a guy using drugs and he flips the character upside down in a panel.
Hmm. Interesting.
And he does a similar technique where it's the same panel, but the character is small and you see a larger shot of the whole scene of him leaving a bathroom stall, and the uh, other version of him is flipped, a larger version of him. So
Okay.
it's him having to deal with his own like subconscious or uh, drug addled mind dealing with a thing at the same time as he's having to still move through
Hmm.
three-dimensional space.
That's very interesting. I'd like to take a look at that one. The only example
Hello.
I can think of
I'm
is
waving at me.
you are okay. Only example I can think of is the mangaka who drew Golden Boy. He's got one where he's got I don't remember it might actually be in Golden Boy. I've just seen an excerpt of it. It's never published in English as far as I know.
Sure.
But it's about a university student, and he's about to find whether he passed his exams or not. And he's standing in front of a bulletin board that has all the names of the people who passed, and he's about to find out. He's scanning it, looking for his name, and you
The
don't
golden
see.
blood falls on him.
No, it doesn't fall on him. You don't see when he sees, but he's basically like has this wide-eyed stare of like panic. And as you're watching, it's an 8-page sequence of his eyes focusing on the thing, and then basically the world like tilting away from him behind him, as he's having the reaction to it. And everything has that same kind of like focus pull at the same time that the
Oh, fascinating. I used to, there was an interesting technique that I messed with back in the 90s where, we used to photocopy pages much more. And there's a thing where you could, while the photocopy was going, you could move the original
Right
art and
here, right
blur it in an
here.
interesting way.
right.
So that would be
Right
interesting to
here,
try
right
that technique
here.
of going to a Kinko's and like drawing a picture of the background and moving it around while it's photocopying, just to
Right.
get this weird thing and then pasting a character over it. I wonder what that would look like.
I've actually used that, believe it or not. I'll send you a link. It's from Discard, so it's not out. But
Oh,
I'll send
fascinating.
you the page that I did it for, and it turned out awesome.
Nice.
Yeah,
Sean
I
playing
love.
40 chess while we're all, I'm here just trying to think of new techniques. You're like way ahead of you. Did
No, I
that
had
6 months ago.
I drew it when I was a high school teacher, and I had unlimited access to a photocopier. So I went down there
I'm not
to photocopy
there.
my pencils for each
Mhm.
page before I inked them. and did a few manipulations and popped them in a sequence where somebody has a fever.
Oh, fascinating.
So that's what I used it for. But yeah, I love photocopy manipulation.
Now I'm there.
All right.
It'd be
So
interesting. It makes me think of, it would be really interesting to do a comic where it'd be interesting to do a story where you or give a group of artists like, show what it feels like to have the flu, show what it feels like to be dizzy, and like it's almost like we
yeah,
put in a thing that's like we could put a book like the great big book of emotions and sensations, and just show different cartoonists trying to capture real feelings in sequential art.
yeah, and it would be very interesting to those people and about 30 other people.
I think 4 people would really love it, and the rest of them, what is this?
It would be the greatest book in the world for those 4 people.
Yeah.
So awesome. All right, thanks for watching, guys.
And
Yeah.
and those 4 people will be presidents.
Yeah, 4 presidents.
Bye, everybody. Thanks, co-host Ryan.
Bye, everybody.